Hey there, listeners. Just a heads up, this episode might dive into some heavy stuff like rape, sexual assault, suicide, violence, or drugs. If you or someone you know needs help, reach out to a professional or call a helpline. Remember, we're not experts, we're just here to share stories and start conversations. If you choose to skip this episode, that is totally okay. Take care of yourself and each other. Enjoy the show. Hey, Stephanie, welcome to the Mentally a Badass podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Me too. And I love your whole energy and vibe when we first started talking. So I think this conversation is going to be great. And well, first off, with your father's suicide, I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. I just want to bring that up first. But another thing too is we're going to be talking about the inner critic because I fight with my mind, you fought with your mind, and I'm sure everyone listening has at one point fought with their mind. I can't wait for you to bring your wisdom. So before we begin, I always like to go deep into your past. So let's talk about your father's suicide and the impact that it had on you. Can you by any chance walk us through that?
Sure. So I always say I was 15, but then I told my mom listened to a podcast and she was like, no, you were 17. I was like, those years just all blend together.
Right.
I was 17. I just remember I was a junior in high school. And that November, I was institutionalized. So I went to the hospital for my mental health issues. And I was an inpatient and then an outpatient. And then 6 months later, so after I had gotten out of treatment, my father did what I went into the institution for, which is take his own life. And I was, like I said, a junior in high school. It was the week before APs and SATs. So that tells you how well I did on those.
Mm-hmm.
And I was at a choir competition in San Antonio, Texas. I was currently living in Houston at the time. And my choir had a trip to San Antonio for a competition. And I was at a party with a whole bunch of older students. I was a junior, but I was with seniors and college kids at the time. We were at a college party and we get a call and it said that I needed to get back to the hotel immediately. I thought I was in so much trouble because we were doing something we weren't supposed to do to begin with. And I get to the hotel and they're like, everyone needs to go to their room. And they were like, Stevie, because I was called Stevie at the time, because there were too many Stephanies in high school. So all the chaperones were there and my choir teacher, Mr. Talley, and they were like, everyone else needs to go to their room. Stevie, we need to talk to you. And so they take me into the chaperone's hotel room and they are like, you need to call your mom. And I was like, my dad died, didn't he? Like, I don't know how I knew. I don't know what told me that happened before I even had any idea. And so I called my mom and that's exactly what I was told. And she was like, well, you guys are going to Six Flags theme park tomorrow. It's up to you if you come home now immediately, or you can go to the amusement park with your class. I'm not, there's still stuff that needs to be done here and all of these things. And so I was like, I'm going to stay. So I cried my eyes out under the couch in the lobby, like bawled my eyes out, like just collapsed. I mean, I think a lot of people, when you've dealt with someone passing away suddenly, you just feel your entire body just collapse and you have that wail, like your knees go weak and you just have this like wail that comes out from inside of you. And I went to the amusement park the next day. And honestly, that was the best thing I could have done for myself because I got to scream and cuss and just like laugh hysterically because the rides were allowing me to express myself fully and not be judged for it in any kind of capacity. So that was such a gift to be able to immediately go into a space where I was able to release a lot of grief in a really healthy way.
Yeah, I actually like how you brought that up because most people would think, how can you go to the amusement park? Your dad just died. Like that's, but the way you explained it, it's like that makes a lot of sense. It's like you also have moments where you're feeling so many different emotions, and then one's probably anger, and you're just like screaming that out, right?
Oh,
and
yeah.
then people are not going to think you're crazy. I actually was like,
they were screaming with me.
Yeah, no, for real. And then it's just like, and also Six Flags has a lot of really big roller coasters, but I mean, and yeah, so like I said, I like you bring that up because most people wouldn't think that was a good way of, I'm not going to say, I guess, kind of coping with the loss at the moment. Would you say?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So when you got home, I guess my question is, how did it impact your family? Like once you got home, like how did it How was your experience with that?
So those years are really a blur. Like I'm very much aware of how much I dissociated and how much I just completely numbed out for most of the rest of my junior year, into my senior year, and into my freshman year of college. I was kind of a zombie. My mom was doing the best she could. I mean, she had so many things that had to be done because when someone passes away, then all of a sudden there's all of this stuff that needs to be sorted. So you kind of don't get a chance to fully feel and grieve until all of that stuff is taken care of and done. And my brother was, he was 13 at the time, and he dealt with it in his own way as well.
Yeah, and when you were saying that everything is kind of a blur, it makes sense because your brain blocks out trauma to protect it, to protect you.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, and I had like I said, 6 months before, or I don't know if that's actually right, but November before April, my dad passed away in April. I was institutionalized in November. So I was on a cocktail of medication. I was on a cocktail of pills that were preventing me from actually probably feeling the extent of the experience that my body was probably wanting or needing to feel. So there was a little bit of a buffer, I would say.
Yeah.
And it was a very interesting experience because I would probably have already numbed out anyway, but the medication allowed me to be even more numb.
Yeah, I've experienced that. Like I'm on lamotrigine
Okay.
and Wellbutrin. So I think lamotrigine is the one that's blocking it out because I noticed that when I'm on it, it's like in my head I'm just like, I haven't cried in a while. And I mean, I guess that people would think that's a good thing. You're like, oh yeah, you're not sad, right? But it's just like for me, if I'm a very emotional person, so it's like if I don't like, I guess it's like the numb feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like wondering, is it numb or I'm just stable?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there's something interesting that's coming through right now that I'll share is that I'm actually going through another process right now of grieving. Not my dad, but my dog passed away.
I'm sorry.
2 weeks ago, I think. And once again, I had the ability to be in a space where I was able to fully feel and release. But what was interesting is that I do ecstatic dance every Sunday. And it's a healing practice that's so fun. And it just gets you in your body and releases energy. But I went over and I laid down because after this like moshing session, like it was full blown like mosh music, so raving and moshing. And then I was like, whoa, I'm dizzy. I'm going to go sit down. But the instructions were like to keep dancing no matter what. And I was like, okay, I'll just like go into my body and feel the sensations. And that's my dance today. And I thought I was just going to be in stillness. And so I allowed for complete stillness. But what ended up happening was a rage button got pushed and all of this rage just came out. But I honestly think it's because I was in the stillness that it allowed that to be accessed. Whereas we're always moving so fast, we're always doing so much that we don't actually feel what's happening inside. And so when I paused and was completely still and was just going in, all of a sudden this like massive rage and tantrum just was allowed to be accessed and hit. And it was so powerful. And I just moved through it. It was a good like 90 seconds, maybe a full 3 minutes of just raging, stomping my feet, screaming. And I felt so good afterwards. And it was like, that was what needed to be expressed. That was what needed to come up. So it's having permission in safe spaces to be fully available to the full extent of the emotion.
Yeah, completely relatable. I feel like we're like twins and sisters because I've experienced exactly what you experienced. And what I do when I've had that rage is I had like this big teddy bear.
Yes.
And I would beat the crap out of it.
Yes. It's like an actual practice. I do actual rage practices because I know that energy just needs to be moved and released. And then then it doesn't show up in ways it shouldn't. Then it doesn't show up at the like cashier who can't get her, drawer open or like, it doesn't show up sideways. It shows up fully expressed in a safe space.
Right. And I feel like more people need to know that. It's like, I feel like some people, if they do feel that anger, they feel shame. They're like, oh, why do I feel this? Like, I feel like something's wrong with me, But at the end of the day, you are human and you are going to experience having emotions. And if you are suppressing like the anger or the sadness, then as you were saying, it would just randomly show up at the lady at the grocery store. And then it's like, that's when you're like, you're spreading pain to like a person who's completely innocent. You're just taking it out on somebody. And it's like, or like let's say you hold it in there too, right? Because you have some
Mm-hmm.
emotional intelligence. Then you're kind of like internalizing all of that, which apparently I did at one point, didn't realize it. And
Mm-hmm.
then it manifests and shows up as you get older. And
Mm-hmm.
then you kind of like turn into this like miserable human being. And people are like, oh my gosh, she's such a miserable old lady. You know what I mean?
Right.
How we always
Right.
say, like, oh, that neighbor 80 something, oh, she's so crabby all the time. It's like,
Yeah.
well, it's true. It's like she clearly didn't
She didn't.
know what we know. She didn't know where to put it, and then it's like, of course, people who abuse other people, and it's like, or people who like punch a wall next to you, and it's like,
Right.
even though they're not punching you in the face, it's still
Ooh.
traumatizing.
And that's still abuse. So if anyone's got someone punching a wall next to them, get out.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. And because people
Whoa.
think that abuse is just like smacking you in the face or something like that. It's like, emotional abuse, people say emotional abuse is actually worse
Mm-hmm.
than physical abuse. And it's true. It's like, because emotional abuse, it's like they're pretty much smacking your brain, and that
Mm-hmm.
can like stick. And then it's like, it's harder to actually heal from emotional abuse through like physical abuse.
Yeah. And what I've learned from my own personal experiences in that is that if you don't treat yourself right inside, like this is going back to like we were possibly talking about the inner critic, right?
Yeah.
So if your inner critic is extremely hateful, is extremely critical, is extremely abusive, then your environment is probably going to be showing the same thing. And you're not going to realize that's wrong. You're not going to realize like, this is not okay to be treated this way. But when you start to really kind of like look at that voice and start seeing it as like, whoa, you need attention. You're trying to protect me from something. This is all an internal war. Let me go in and get curious about you and like learn how to love you and see you and ask you questions. Then you start to treat yourself kindly. You start to be self-compassionate and self-loving. That all of a sudden the contrast of someone treating you poorly or having emotional abuse come at you, you're able to be like, whoa, I will not stand for that. That is not okay. This is not how I am allowed to be treated. And you're able to get out of those relationships and be in healthy ones because you are healthy to yourself.
Yeah, it's true. It's because when you like, the inner critic it's pretty much your bully in your brain. So like if you went through like childhood abuse, bullying and such, like when your brain is developing, anything that like people are saying to you, you're developing that as like your self-identity. So like I personally went through a lot of bullying and such, and I was always told three things: I'm ugly, stupid, and weird, apparently. And so, it imprinted in my brain. And like, still today, I have moments where it can come out. So I actually kind of came out today, right before we got on here. I forgot to do something with my meds and I messed up and I called myself an idiot. But anyway, I caught myself doing that. I was like very emotional because I'm just like, oh my God, I think I messed up like my whole thing of medication because I forgot to put it in the fridge. And it's like, I was like, I'm such a fucking idiot. And then I was like, literally after I just kind of went through the emotions, I'm like,
Right.
like, I know like this is like, people can see this on YouTube, but I know if they're listening to audio, they're probably like, what is this, like, this moment of silence?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm just like, that's literally what I thought. I'm just like, here she goes. She comes out. And it's like, wait, I don't know for sure if this was something I read from you about you. It's like, did you like name your inner critic?
I did.
Okay.
I did. So I have two things to talk about real quick because we've talked about anger and I want to bring that in. Anger is actually an incredible energy and emotion to have because it's fuel. For me, it's fuel for getting stuff done, for getting stuff made, for creating, for making change, right? So I had so much anger around my dad's death that I was like, what is it inside of us that makes us want to take our life? Like, what is it? And then I went on this whole journey of creating this character named Razum, which turns out to be the inner critic or alcohol. Like for me, for my dad, I was making him as the character of alcoholism at the time. But what really it is the conditioned mind, the inner critic, the negative belief, the negative self-talk and self-doubt. And I named it Razum. And I started to realize that after I've written this film, I'm using it in my everyday life as a tool. I'm using it as a way of being like, oh, wait, who's talking? Is that me or is that Razum? Like I'm able to switch. So one of my main tools I give anyone I work with is first stop, like even my like 8-year-olds in volleyball, like I give them this tool as well because they're serving and they get so discouraged because they're little and they can't get the ball over the net. I'm like, okay. And then they get frustrated. I'm like, well, what are you telling yourself? And they're like, I can't make it. And all those little self-doubts come up. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay, well, let's give that voice a name. And,
Mhm.
one's like, well, I'm going to name her Betsy or something. And I was like, why Betsy? She was a bully to me. I was like, okay, we're going with it. And
Oh my
then,
God.
and then, and
That's
then we just started
interesting.
playing. Like, if 8-year-olds can do it, they were like, Betsy's talking to me and telling me I can't make it. And I was like, okay, what are we going to do? We're going to put tape on its mouth, and we're just going to sit it down in a chair in your imagination,
Yeah.
and you're going to serve again. And they make it over because they're able to realize, like, they don't have to listen to that voice. And it's kind of the same with adults. If you can start really catching it, and the way that I catch it is I gave it a name. So I would say, give it a name, make it as ridiculous and wild as you possibly can, because then it makes you laugh and it makes you realize how ridiculous and wild your mind is. So
Yeah.
that was like the basis of a screenplay that now is an actual physical tool I use in my everyday life.
Yeah, yeah, and we're definitely going to talk more about your film as we move forward. But no, I did hear about the whole. I think I read it also in a book too
Mm-hmm.
about like naming. Well, they said ego, but like inner critic, ego, and such.
Yeah.
Now I'm gonna like, think. I'm like, what do I want to name mine?
Right? It's fun when you do it that way, because then you start seeing it because you've named it and you've made it something that is not you. But if you think
Yeah,
it's you, then it's like, oh, I don't realize, like, I don't have to listen to that. So
yeah.
it's
There's
it's it's a practice of mindfulness. It's a practice of really
self awareness.
witnessing how your mind talks to you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. There's actually this song, and it's called I think it's called Death Match, and it's pretty much the whole idea of the song is kind of like you're boxing,
Okay.
and then you're like fighting that person,
Yeah.
and then it's like in the song the lyrics is like calling her like a fucking disease. Like that's only the actually did they say fucking disease? Did they use the word fucking? Oh yeah, they used the word fucking.
Mm-hmm.
Just to
Mm-hmm.
like just like the anger in it, and it's just like yeah, and it's with all the actual like sound effects, it sounds like you're in a boxing match,
Yeah.
and it's true. It's like, oh yeah, and then I think in the song it said like the meds can't suppress it or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. And I was listening to this and I was like, first I was thinking like, could I have BPD, and the girl who sings this have BPD too? And it's like you have these moments where like a different person takes over and you don't like that person.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like sometimes the inner critic can overpower the person you are and want to be. And then it's like you take, like as you were saying, you take it out of someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like it's yeah, and it's taking over, and it's kind of like thinking like there's like an angel and a devil, and the devil's starting to take over, and it's like this it's the inner critic, and you're like, just sit down, like shut up.
Mm-hmm.
You know what
Right.
I mean? Oh my gosh, I like want to name her, and I just can't. I want to like name her so bad, I just can't think of right now. I was
My God,
thinking
I
of
can't wait to hear. Wait to hear what you name it, because that's going to be so fun. Because what is
yeah,
also funny? So we say fight, right? Like we say, like, oh, we're fighting it. And the original title
yeah,
of the original title of my screenplay was Breaking Free, because I was
yeah.
like, I'm like breaking free of this thing, right? And then through the years, it changed, and it's now Bloom, because what I
Hmm.
realized is that like we're still fighting ourselves. Like there's still that
Yeah.
conflict, there's still that that violence and that brutality amongst ourselves. If we're
Hmm.
constantly like, shut up, like we don't want to listen to you, like I don't want to listen to you. It's
Right.
like, what if there's a way to like lovingly hold space for that part of you? Like, what if there's a way to be like, oh my gosh, okay, you're scared, you're trying to protect me from the unknown, you're doing your job really well. This is a
Hmm.
pattern that I've created that works because of whatever happened in my childhood, and I don't need it anymore. So
Hmm.
then you like drop into your body and you're like, what am I really feeling? Because you're trying to keep me from feeling something that I actually need to feel. And I'm like, I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling rejected. I'm feeling
Hmm.
abandoned. I'm feeling that no one loves me. Like, what is it? Right. And
Hmm.
then once you start to like tune into your body and get present with what's actually happening versus what the mind is trying to keep you distracted from, that's when the healing comes, because you're able to move through emotions that you never moved through when you were a kid.
Yeah. So back to my scenario that I brought up before was
Yeah.
when so what happened was I have like eye medication and I was supposed to
Mm-hmm.
refrigerate it, and then I forgot, and it was like sitting out in room temperature for like 21 hours, and
Mm-hmm.
I like saw it, I was like, oh my God, and I like ran to the fridge and just threw it in there. And so I was feeling those emotions, and that's when I call myself an idiot.
Hmm.
So I guess, what do you make of that? I guess I was just angry at myself. Like, what do you think that, I guess?
There's some story around making a mistake. Like if you make a
Yeah.
mistake or if you don't know something, then
Mhm.
you're an idiot. And
Uh-huh.
so it's like that belief and that narrative came up. And
Yeah.
it's, where else in your life do you call yourself an idiot? Where else in your life do you feel like it's not okay to make a mistake as a human being?
Yeah,
And
no, that
then
makes sense.
and then start to like just show yourself compassion. It's like everyone makes mistakes. You're not the only person who's like forgotten to put their medication. I mean, I can't take birth control because I forget to take it. Like, and it messes up my body in really weird ways.
Uh-huh.
But there's so many layers to it. But just noticing that you called yourself an idiot and you're like, where have I heard that before? Who else has called me an idiot? What was the
Yeah.
actual root of that belief of being an idiot? Because it's not that I forgot to put my medicine in the refrigerator. It's
Mhm.
something deeper than
Oh my gosh. Yeah, and that makes sense because I actually did struggle. Like, every time I made a mistake as a child, like, I would always get screamed at to the point where it's like I could, like, if I like drop my water on like the floor or
that.
like made a mess, like I would get yelled at and like punished and such. And then like if I was like doing a project in school and I would like mess up because my handwriting was so bad, and I actually would, I don't know, put a marker like stripe here when I went in, and we had to like get a new board or whatever. Like I would
Mm-hmm.
get like so like yelled at. Like I remember when I said my mom was yelling at me and I said, "I'm so sorry, I made a mistake." And then she was like, "You're always making a mistake, your whole life's a mistake." And
Ooh.
yeah, and she doesn't like, I mean, me and my mom, we have a good relationship now, and we've, moved through things, and I love my mom. She has her own demons and
Mm-hmm.
such, but when I tell her that, she like doesn't remember, and I'm like, yeah, cuz was in your trauma. You
Right.
know what they say? It's like, yeah, you're not going to remember. It was like a random Tuesday for you. But for me, I was like crying in my bedroom, but I think I remember too that my dad overheard it and was like, yeah, go apologize to her. And she did, and since my dad said it to her, she calmed down and she was like, yes, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have called you that. But I think at that time, it's still kind of processed in my head because it happened.
Mm-hmm.
And like I remember it so well, and exactly where I was in the house, what couch I was sitting on. And so yeah, when you were saying, it's like, since and that was like, I would say that was the most severe moment where I
Mm-hmm.
was like, if I made a mistake, like my whole life's a mistake kind of thing. And I know she didn't mean it like that. I
Right.
believe that my mom just didn't like being inconvenienced, and clearly she was just under a lot of stress that she didn't know how to regulate herself
Right.
because of her own trauma in her
Absolutely.
childhood. So like I understand that now, and I sympathize and give her grace on that. But at the time, I was like 11 or 12. I didn't know anything. I was just like,
Mm-hmm.
and so also I went to a Catholic school as well. And you
Me
can
too.
imagine twinsies.
All girl Catholic school for middle school.
Oh wow, yeah, mine was co-ed, but yeah, I can even imagine, especially with like all girls. But yeah, but you can tell, like, the nuns are strict, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I remember where if I get detention or lunch detention, right? I don't remember what I did to, maybe I made a mistake on something. Who knows? I don't know. But they used to have you sit on this bench, and while like people were going out for recess, you're on that bench, and they kind of felt very like you're ashamed and embarrassed.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of wonder, because I don't really know for sure, but I wonder if they put the bench there for that reason, or if they didn't have any other place to put us.
That's an interesting question. I mean,
Yeah.
the psychology with those nuns is very interesting.
Yeah, I can't even ask that anymore because she passed away. Apparently, I found her obituary. But, actually, my eighth grade teacher follows me on social media.
Awesome. That
Yeah,
is
yeah. She
awesome.
actually like watches my stuff a lot. Like she's always watching my story. She's always like, she doesn't interact with anything, but like I always notice that she's always like, I guess she's just curious about my life. I don't know. But I should
Yeah.
like low key message her, be like, yo, remember when you got like gave me the attention?
Um, I ran into my eighth grade teacher a few years ago, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, I remember you. Were you the?" She remembers me because of all of my problems.
Oh,
She's like, "I always remember the ones that were troubled." Like, was
be like,
like,
gee, thanks.
I was like, I mean, yeah. She was like, "You were part of the crew with the eating disorders, right?"
Wait, wasn't
Yeah. I was like, I went through that.
Oh, man.
And she's like, well, how are you doing? And it was so great. And it was just wild. She was my science teacher. And she's like, I always remember the troubled ones. I was like, well, I was very troubled at that time. That is not a lie.
That's a little weird thing of saying, like, oh, I remember you. But I wouldn't be like, oh, yeah, you're like one of the troubled children. It's like,
yeah, I wasn't the troubled child. I was just troubled. I'm like, well, I'm glad I wasn't the troubled child.
oh my God, that's
I just had a lot of troubles that I was going through.
But the way that, like, oh, I mean, I'm sure she didn't probably realize what she was saying, but
Not at all.
oh my God, that's so funny. And I guess it's like naturally you're gonna remember that if you're involved more with that student for, that reason. But yeah, no, that's great. I feel like I need to like imagine I get her on the podcast and being like, hello, Mrs. Blah blah blah. So tell me, why'd you traumatize me? I really hope she doesn't listen to this.
That'd be hilarious.
I mean, there's always a possibility. I do promote this podcast
That's true.
on like my socials. I mean, I just make sure I don't promote it on my personals. But I mean, unless I title it "Middle School Trauma," which wouldn't make any sense. But
Right?
But I feel like that would be like, huh, what happened in there? Right?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I would be. That would actually be a very interesting conversation.
It would be.
I
It
would
would
be
be
like,
very
hey,
interesting.
So when you did lunch detention, why'd you put us on a bench? But I'm pretty sure that like probably wasn't her decision. I'm sure that was like the principal or the administration or whatever.
Right.
But also, oh my God, I can go on about my 6th grade year. My 6th grade year was traumatizing.
Wow.
Like it's insane. So like just talk like quickly about it. But
middle school is so important to talk about. I feel like those are like the years. I was a volleyball coach for 6th through 8th graders. And so I got to kind of see the start of the things that we probably both dealt with the mental health stuff. And so talking about middle school is probably the best way to go. Cause it's like, I feel like I don't know if that's where it started. I believe it probably did start in like childhood, but it starts to like blossom in middle school.
Yeah.
So
I want to,
Oh, I want to hear about your 6th grade year.
Yeah. So like technically my like trauma started like before 3rd grade, but anyway, 6th grade. So 6th grade was like a traumatic for like everybody in the class. So it's not like it directly happened to me. I was actually one of the lucky ones that none of the big stuff happened to. But what happened was like, so one person accidentally drank or like had like I guess was like chewing on a pen, so they had to call poison control.
Oh, wow.
One person almost died of a peanut allergy, so the paramedics had to come in. One person ran away like during like lunchtime. She like ran to a different town, so they had to get the cops involved. And so that was one thing.
Yeah, hormones.
And so I know, right? Oh, she clearly got lunch detention for the rest of the year. I mean, that makes sense for like safety reasons. We don't know if she's gonna run again. And then apparently our whole class was just not getting along. Like it was also like 30 of us. So apparently there was a lot of drama and fights and such. So they had to like outsource and hire like a therapist for us. So like every Tuesday during our lunchtime, we had to talk, all as a class, we had a therapist come in and like talk to us. And from my memory, I think she was scared of my class. I think
a bunch of preteens. She probably was.
Oh my God. She was like, oh my God, these people are a bunch of crazy people. Like, another thing too, out of all of this, my 6th grade teacher was pregnant.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So just adding all that. So, I mean, I think like, I can't remember too much detail of each event, but I do remember there were so many that happened in like just 1 year. So yeah, I think one person punched someone in the face and their like teeth came out. I think that was one thing.
Wow.
Yeah, there was a lot. And then one person got expelled because he like threatened to kill somebody.
Wow.
Like he wrote like a note. It was like a note passing around, and the note got to the person was like, I guess saying I'm gonna murder you or whatever.
Oh wow.
And who knows if he was actually serious? Like I don't know, but obviously they didn't take that seriously, so he got expelled. Yeah, we're very angry apparently.
Yeah,
like Catholic school. Praise the Lord.
My middle school was kind of when all of the attention got on me around my mental health. I wrote a poem and I won a contest with this poem, which was I got to share it to the whole school and like read it to the whole school. And after that, I became like the therapist's project, because in the poem, it talked about like not fitting in, feeling invisible, just what every honestly what I believe every normal, probably 12, 13-year-old feels, of just like, how do I navigate in this world? But they took it very seriously. And so I always ask myself, if that hadn't had happened, like if I hadn't expressed myself in that way, would I have become like the school project? And going, like, I was required to start going to the therapist or the counselor like once a week in school. And at the time, granted, I was living in a very active alcoholic home. So that's a whole different, playground of demons
just
that
gonna
come
ask
up.
that actually.
Yeah. And so it was starting to really reflect in just my social life of just like, the isolation, the just hiding. And so for the rest of the school year, I basically was just going to the counselor once a week. And then they had me go to a psychiatrist. And then several years later, ended up in inpatient. But ultimately, it was like the start of people noticing that there was something different about how I was showing up.
Yeah. So you mentioned how you did go to the counselors but you then had to go to a mental health hospital. So do you think there was something that could have been done differently seeing those counselors? Because that typically is supposed to help you avoid that.
Yeah, I think for me, I actually noticed a pattern. So when I was in elementary school, I made friends with the school counselor because I didn't want to go to recess or go to lunch,
Mm-hmm.
because I was not feeling great in my class, like with my peers. So I basically just became like buddies with the counselor. And there was once again a lot going on in my home life that I actually had a safe space to share and talk about, and like have someone listen and be like, yeah, okay, this is, not necessarily normal, and, all of those things. And then in middle school, it started to come up again, but it was because I shared in my poem. Then everyone like kind of came on me. To do it differently, I don't know. It's such a hard question to ask because I was put on medication when I was 14, and they never were able to get the cocktail right. So when I was 14 to 24, I was on cocktails of pills all the time, and never really learning how to be in my body, or, be okay just being me. I'm just a hypersensitive being that walks around in the world a little differently sometimes.
Yeah.
There are other people like me, and I get that. I mean, addicts are very prone to hypersensitivity. That's why, the world is a lot. So it's like the solution is whatever drug of choice. And it's like ADHD. It's just all of this stuff combined. And the fact that they were never really able to get the chemical balance right,
Mm-hmm.
it was always kind of like I was always trying different meds. I was always trying like, what's going to make me feel better? What's going to make me feel right? What's going to make me not have anger outbursts or not feel like a zombie? Or there were so many different side effects, and they just, like I said, they were never able to get the right one. And for some people, they do get the right one and it works for them. Like the reality is like there are ones that do work. And if you get the right one, it does work. But for me, I never really got the right concoction, I guess.
Yeah.
Because it was never talked about nearly as much as it is today. Because this was back in the early 90s, early 2000s, when like Prozac Nation was just being put out. So I don't know if it helped me. I don't know if it hurt me, because all I know is my experience.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'm like, maybe I wouldn't be alive if I didn't take them, or maybe I would have been more in my body and more available to who I really am as a person versus what the medication made me feel. So it's a tricky question to really answer, is how I see it.
No, yeah, that's true. It's more complicated than it is, and everybody does have a different experience. I've had my fair share of cocktails.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and finally found something that was right for me, that doesn't make me want to jump off a bridge. It's like, it's working when you don't when you it's what I said. One of my reels is that the medication's working if you cross the street and look both ways.
I mean, just do basic normal.
Right? And not like hope that a car just hits you, right? So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's like what I meant. It's like if you're like suicidal, you'll
Mm-hmm.
like walk across the street and be like, yeah, it's something hit me, it's fine. Like, you know what I mean? It's like you don't care.
Absolutely.
But
No,
if you want to
absolutely.
live, yeah, and the medication helps where like you want to live if you have the right medication, of course. And it's like, okay, let me actually check because I don't want to die today, you know? So
Yeah.
that's when I like knew it was working. So you said that you went off your medication when you were 24. Like, how was that experience? 'Cause I know it can be hard.
It was very challenging. So I tried to go off before several times on my own, like just cold turkey. And those events led me to like fetal position on the phone in my dorm room with the suicide hotline. Like that was not the right route to take. Like getting off my meds by myself was not the right route to take. Doing it cold turkey was not the right route to take because your body gets used to it, right? So for me, it was I went on a retreat. I went on an acting retreat, an artist retreat to Bali. And yeah, my teacher is amazing. I love my teacher so much. They really, like my acting teachers really helped me with so many things just in my healing that I didn't realize until way later that that's what they were giving me, those major gifts. But I went to Bali and I just felt in my bones, like for the first time in my life, I would be okay without being on medication. I just like felt it, like this certainty, like I'm going to be okay without medication. And so I went back to New York and I called my doctor and I just was like, hey, like I don't want to be on meds anymore. I really want to get off of them. And he's like, no, like you need to be on them because of your dad's history, your family's history. Like this is you're in your DNA is basically what I was told. And I was like, okay, well, I really want to get off of them and I'm going to trust this desire and this certainty. So I would love to do it with the doctor. I'm going to do it no matter what, but I would love to do it with the doctor. And he's like, okay, we'll do it and we'll do it the right way. And so we started in May because I told my teacher, my college acting professor, I was like, hey, I'm going to get off my medication. And he's like, no, don't do it until after finals. Like we don't want something to rock the boat because you're doing so well right now. Like you're doing great. And I'm totally rooting for you and I believe in you, but let's just wait to do that big change until after.
That makes sense.
Until you graduate, basically. And so I did. I waited until mid-May and I worked with my doctor the whole time. And the side effects were not fun, the weaning off, the withdrawal, all of that. But I did it so slowly. I was finally off all of my meds by the end of September. So we started in May and we just like through that summer, just like took, tapered back. And if the side effects were too extreme, if the withdrawal was too extreme, we would just go up a little bit more and then we go back down and then we go up a little more. Like we just played it until it was like not so aggressive to my body. And by the end of September, I was med free. And then the work comes in of like being in the world after a decade of being on medication, not on medication. So, I mean, I had a therapist, I have, all of the support that I could possibly need. And just starting the journey of learning what it was like to be me without medication. And I don't know how long that took of just getting used to learning how to deal with big emotions, learning how to feel everything that I didn't feel when my dad passed away. It wasn't until 2014, when I actually felt the degree of grief from losing my dad. My dad passed away in 2003. So it was a really long time and it was scary to feel that extent of grief, but it was finally, my body was finally ready. I was finally ready. And I had the ability to fall apart for 3 months and just like be in that grief for 3 months. Really. I moved back to Oklahoma. My mom was living there at the time and I had gotten back from a wild adventure and it was 3 months of just like not being able to get out of bed and really feeling the grief that I never felt from when my dad passed away, 11 years ago.
Yeah, and just hearing about like that 3 months and how you were able to like lay in bed and just have all of those emotions just surface and just come out, like that sounds amazing. Like like that's I feel like it's like a good I mean it's healing, but also it's kind of like a good like vacation for your brain. And I also just like a big believer that a lot of people don't think like, oh, your brain needs time to just take a step back, let all the emotions out, heal. And they don't think of that. They like think about it like when you break your leg, you're not going to be running on it.
Right.
It's like it's this it's like you kind of see what I'm saying. It's just the whole principle of it is like in the concept it's similar. It's like if you break your leg, you're not going to be running on it. You're going to have to spend time healing from it. And that's like the same thing for the brain. And in the society that we live in, it's like No one talks about that. No one allows that. It's like, I mean, if you go through a traumatic event, let's say, I don't know, if you're working, if like obviously if you have a job and you go through a traumatic event, like, I don't know, someone got murdered, or you just saw someone get, like stuff like that, then it's like, okay, yeah, we're gonna give you time to heal. But it's like they do that. They give, let's say, 3 months or 2 months or whatever. They don't really, like, I guess it doesn't really come out. And like you were saying, it could come out later on. And so they can, after, post traumatic event, they're going to feel numb. I don't think I know anybody where they go through a traumatic event. I feel like there's a time period where you're just numb and you just feel nothing. Like, I know, like, example I'm going to give you, I know it's not like traumatic, like if you were to get raped or anything like that, but one of my breakups with a boyfriend that I had, I was devastated with it, right? And I felt nothing after. And it was just super weird because, I've had my fair share of relationships and breakups, and usually I cry, right? Like, you know what I mean? But I felt nothing. It was so weird. It was so weird. And from my memory, I don't think I was maybe I was on medication. I have no idea. I don't remember. But it came out like a couple months later, where I actually was drinking that night, so that wasn't helpful. And he was there. Like, we're at that point, like, we're able to be friends. And he was helping me move because I was moving. And then, like, after moving, we're just like, I was with some friends, we're just drinking. He wasn't drinking, he doesn't drink. Something that, like, a roommate did triggered me. And then all of a sudden he was driving me home and I started screaming at him. Like, screaming. I was like, oh my, I couldn't control myself. And it's like, that's the one thing that's just really evil about alcohol. It's like you lose all of your, like, first filters and just control over your emotions, depending on how much you drink, of course. Yeah. And I lost it. And it could have been like, crap, it came out. Like, I was numb. And I was scared that I was numb because at that time, I'm like, I know about psychology, and it's like, this is not normal. And I'm like, why can't I feel sad? Why am I not sad over this? And it was frustrating me. And it's like, oh my God, what's going to happen? I was afraid it was going to come out in the worst way, which it kind of did. And then, like, I literally that day, I like text 988. And by the way, they actually like never got back to me. I texted them and they were like, oh, sorry, we have a high volume right now. And I was like,
they asked you how serious it was?
Well, I texted them. I wasn't really have the courage yet to call and talk to somebody. I kind of wanted to do over the messages. So that was just me. And it was like 2 a.m. So I'm pretty sure a lot of people were going through things at 2 a.m.
Oh,
I'm pretty sure that's probably like their highest. And when it comes to like volume,
I've called the suicide hotline several times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't think they ever texted me back.
That's wild.
I know, right?
Was it the right number?
Yeah, I did. It was like saying like, oh, we're sorry, we're having a high volume. Like, it's okay, I don't know. Like, they had like a whole like auto thing.
Yeah.
And it was the right people. But I was like, at that point, I was having so much anger. And I was at that day punching my teddy bear and such. And it was a scary night because I was I was on medication. Because that's when I was looking at my medication, debating on overdosing. So that's when I knew I was on medication. So I was getting that bad when I was staring at my medication and my inner critic was taking over.
I was about to ask you, what was your inner critic saying? So I had
do it. Like, that's what I was fighting with. I was like, stop it.
Literally, that's a scene in my film. Like, that scene. It's not medication.
Watch that film.
It's going to be made. It's not yet there. It's in pre-production.
Okay, so it's not done yet? Okay.
It's in pre-production.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a second. Yeah.
No, so, but when you were saying that, there's actually a moment in the soon-to-be film where she's on the edge of a cliff, like legit the edge of a cliff, and all of that is going through of like, nobody loves you, nobody cares, you don't deserve to be here, you're such a burden to everyone who is around you, do it, like, it's so easy, just like, it's almost like something was like cheering me on to jump.
Yes.
Like, it was like, do it. And then, and so I feel like there's so many people who have been in that position where that voice is just so loud. And so my question to you is, what made you not do it? what pulled you out of it? Because that's the whole question my film asks, is like, why did someone do it versus someone who not do it? Because my dad did it. So it's like, why did he not be able to pull himself back? You know, why was I able to pull myself back? So why were you able to pull yourself back?
Well, I think the most important thing is trying to think in that moment where your emotion is overpowering, is trying to find that little bit of logic to come into play. And at that time, I have been through a lot of treatments. I've seen therapists. I have knowledge on psychology, as we were talking before we got on here, and I just knew it was my inner critic talking, and I knew that this is not what I should do. And it's like, so I think just myself, I was trying to, I guess, overpower my inner critic because it was getting stronger. It was getting stronger. And I think I just kind of try to just remember what my life is really like and try to think of all the good things in my life. The biggest thing that keeps me from killing myself is having a support system. That's the biggest
Absolutely.
thing.
100%.
That is the biggest thing. And I say, like, if I did not have a support system and what my life is today, I would probably be dead. I was actually diagnosed with bipolar 2.
Me too.
Sisters.
Hi. We're like, oh, yay, cheers.
Yeah. We're traumatized Catholic school girlies with bipolar 2.
Yeah, it's wild. I don't hold on to that label.
Yeah, I'm just being funny.
I was diagnosed bipolar 2 when I was 14.
Yeah. Yeah, I was diagnosed when I was 17 because I was self-harming. So my mom caught me doing that and took me to a psychiatrist. And they're like, yeah, you got bipolar 2. And they're like, oh, you may have BPD, but we're not sure because when you're a minor, they're not really sure.
Right.
But yeah, no, I do. I got diagnosed in the future. But where was I? So yeah, so I think that let's say if I didn't have my parents, if I had nobody else living, or if I was living alone, I think that's another thing too I try to consider, because I was living with roommates. So I also try to consider, like, I don't want them to see me, like, because they're going to be the ones who will walk in on it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And yeah, so that's what happened. It would be my roommates finding me. And I don't want to put that through them. So there was still a little bit of me that was trying to just fight through it, just trying to just be like, no. And then I guess it worked, and I didn't. Eventually I went to sleep, and I woke up extremely depressed and slept till like 6 p.m.
Yeah.
Because like
absolutely.
I was like also hungover too.
Yeah.
And because like obviously when you're drinking too, it's like you're feeling suicidal and you have alcohol in your system. It's just like a recipe of disaster. And I honestly, I wouldn't even know what happened if I was like standing on a cliff. Because when you're standing on a cliff, it's like, well, if you're obviously overdosing, you have time to still survive. You'll call 911, they'll pump your stomach. But if you're going off a cliff, the probability of you surviving is like less, of course.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I think at the end of the day, and I think at the end of the day for really anything, it's just community and support. And I was reading a book, actually. It's called What Happened to You? And it's about trauma. And it was just saying that pretty much what it was saying at the end of the day was first going back into like figuring out what happened to you, to work through that and not think what is wrong with me. Think of what happened to me.
Yeah, nothing's wrong with you.
Yeah, exactly. And so human beings need connection. Like from the beginning of time, we all had our tribe. And in this modern day world, we are like, a lot of people don't have a tribe. They're alone. And these are people who are more likely to commit suicide. And I don't know your father. I don't know his like life circumstance. I mean, I guess if you don't mind me asking, like, did he, I guess, feel like alone, or, I mean, I'm sure that you are obviously
so
some type of support system.
There was a lot going on with my dad. He was an alcoholic on and off the wagon. So I have strict rules for myself around alcohol, because you were sharing about your drinking. It's like when I had my contemplation when I was on the edge of a cliff, because I was actually literally on the edge of a cliff. I was drinking, and it was like one of the nights that I had decided that I was going to drink. And so I've made it a rule for myself that I only drink if it's celebratory. So I do drink. I'm not sober. I don't need to be sober because I'm not an alcoholic, but I am very intentional when I do drink, and I make sure that intention is celebratory and not running away from my emotions. I'm not emotional, like all of these things. But with my dad, he was an alcoholic. And he was sober for the first 9 years of my life. And then he fell back off the wagon, and he just never could get back on because he was going to Russia on and off. He was home for 3 weeks, gone for 2 weeks, home for 3 weeks, gone for 2 weeks. And in Russia, it's really hard not to drink because that's just part of the culture, part of, and, he was in oil and gas, and that's pretty, high up there with that world. And so I don't know if I know he had support because he did have his like sponsor, and he did have his AA group that he did hold on to, even though he wasn't sober all the time. He did have stints of sobriety after I was 9. But I just think that the pressures of his responsibilities just got to him, like his relationship with my mom was on the rocks. There were so many times when she had thrown him out because of his drinking. And this was like the last time kind of deal. Like, this is like the papers are being drawn up, but they never were signed kind of situation. And so I think he lost everything. He moved out, he lost me, he lost my brother. We were all mad at him. There was a lot happening, and I'm sure his demons just got really, really bad, because when you're self-medicating, especially if you're on prescription drugs, you don't know what you're going to unleash and unlock. And it's just like he just kind of never came back, I guess. He just started going down really fast. And as a child, like as a teenager and as a kid, it's really hard and confusing to not understand why someone can't get sober. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you understand addiction or not, but when you're young and someone just constantly is not able to get sober, it's really challenging to understand, like, you don't love me enough. Am I not good enough? And you don't mean to make it about you, but ultimately kind of when you're a kid, everything is kind of about you.
Yeah.
And
you just don't understand it.
Yeah. In your brain. And it's like, it was a very big, alcoholism was just rampant. And there was really nothing, once that disease took hold fully, there was nothing he could do to get out of it. And he wasn't willing to. I think there's a humility and a pride that has to be let go of for you to be able to really get the help you need if you are in active addiction. And he was never able to drop to his knees and just surrender to the fact that he had the inability to control this on his own.
Yeah, and that goes back to whatever happened to him in his childhood, that he never went forth to, heal from that. And it gets harder, of course, when you have an addiction to alcohol. And it is really hard to understand when, obviously as a kid, it's like that's easy to say. Like, not, I'm trying to word this correctly where I'm not making any sense right now. But like when you're a kid, obviously you can't understand. You're not gonna like your parents aren't gonna say like, oh, this is what alcoholism. Like, no, they're gonna want to protect you from that. And all you see as a child is like, my dad's not here, my dad keeps drinking, and and that totally makes sense. And I think, I guess what it was he had a trigger. It was the trigger. And that's another thing that's so scary, is like, for people who have these challenges, it's like they're a trigger that can set them off.
Right.
Set them off to do things like either kill yourself or
hurt someone else.
Yeah. Like, I watch enough Criminal Minds to see these triggers, but yeah, no, I just like, in moments like this, I'm just like, I wish, I don't know what I'm saying. Because there was a point where I actually had a roommate that was suicidal. And she was to the point where she did write a note. And she actually, because I was actually the one who checked up on her out of all the roommates, because I noticed that she was never leaving her room. Yeah. She was sleeping like super late to like 5 p.m. And for someone who has these mental health issues themselves, and I was like 22 at this time. And so I kept seeing her like never leaving. And I'm like, okay, and she was open about like, oh yeah, I have depression. My mom attempted suicide. Like, she talked about it to me. And so when especially me knowing that her mother attempted, I'm like getting even like more nervous, So I was knocking on her door, and I was like, hey, like, are you okay? Like, do you want to talk? And eventually she did allow me into her room, and she like gave me a note, and I read the note. Ooh. And it was pretty much saying like, I'm a disappointment to my whole family. Yeah. I shouldn't be here. I'm a waste of space. And it was just, first of all, I like kind of teared a little bit because it was really hard to read. And then after that, I had to think, like, what should I do? Because I also wasn't really close to her. We just started becoming roommates. I think we knew each other for maybe a month.
Wow.
Or two. Like, it was very early in our relationship. And so, but at that time I did meet her family because there was actually like I live in Florida. So there was like a hurricane and my roommate's like, well, like, let's flee to Georgia. So we did. And that girl actually was from Georgia. So we stayed with her family and I got to know her family and her sister. And I learned that like her and her sister are super close, like very close, like best friends. And so I didn't want to be that person to go to her parent because another thing too, since I mentioned I don't know her that well, I don't know if this is something where she's never done before or something that you just never know. And I don't want to be like, I don't know, you know what I mean? So my decision was I had her sister's number and I text her sister and I told her what happened. I'm like, hey, she was right. She wrote a suicide note. She showed me she's been in bed. She hasn't gone out. Is this normal? Like, is this normal? And at first she didn't answer me for a bit. I took a nap and I woke up and I think I got a text from her parents saying we're on our way to pick her up. They went from Georgia to Florida to pick her up.
Yeah.
And they showed up to pick her up. And I don't know for sure if I told her that her parents were coming, but I pretty much triggered the parents to just leave and just go pick her up. Yeah. They didn't even think they were, so I guess the sister saw the text and was like, yeah, no, this is never happened.
Yeah.
So, and who knows, I could have saved her life right there.
Yeah.
Because
absolutely.
it's like, you never know. It's like, what if I didn't do anything?
Right.
I would have been the one finding her dead. Because no one else clearly was knocking on her door. No one else. Because, like, you know, when you're a roommate, sometimes it's like you don't know the boundary. You don't know if it's like, hey, don't bother this person. And because we're just like, at the end of the day, in the beginning, we're just all roommates. We're not friends. So it's like, you know, but I'm always hypersensitive to what's going on around. Because another thing, too, she kind of had an episode one time where I was like sleeping and I just woke up because she was screaming. And I was so confused. I was like, why do I keep hearing a scream saying, help me. And I'm like, what the hell? And then I see her on like the toilet, like shaking, like going back and forth, shaking. And I knew she was drinking that night, but I didn't know she was drinking a whole bottle by herself.
Wow.
So like at that time, and I know she also got fired that day from work. So I know she got fired. And then she was drinking. But like in my head, I didn't think much of it because I was like, oh yeah, she's gonna have like a glass or whatever, right? And no, she had a whole bottle. And then I also was being blamed by the roommates because I mean, I shouldn't have done this, but I bought the bottle for her because she was 19 and I was 22. I know I shouldn't have done that, but at that time, you're kind of just like,
yeah.
You know, like I'm not like I didn't know that it would have ended like this.
Right.
You know, like
you didn't know her history.
Right. Exactly. So of course the roommates were pretty much like, this is all your fault. Like I've gotten that from the other roommates, naturally. Yeah, and I felt like shit there. But anyways, out before that, she was freaking out. And of course I'm trying to be there for her. And so I was trying to think, like, what can I do for her? I was freaking out, like, should I call 911? Like I was gonna call an ambulance because I also know she took anxiety meds that day.
Yeah. Yep.
So I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, should I call 911? Like, I don't want her to freaking die here. I was like, okay, before I get to that extreme of calling an ambulance, let me see what I can do for her. And I said, how about I put her in a tub with warm water to kind of calm her a little bit, right? Because she was having an anxiety attack, like a panic. And so I did that and she calmed down. So we were good. We didn't have to call 911. But I had to sit there and watch her bathe. I know that sounds really weird, but I had to. I'm not going to leave her in a tub by herself when she's going through an episode. So yeah, it was like, oh, I knew her for like a month and I'm bathing her. It's like, you know, and it was just me and this other roommate, and the other room was a guy. So clearly I was going to do it. I told the guy, I'm like, just go into your, because obviously he was concerned too. He heard the screaming. And I told him, like, this is a moment where I'm going to take over. You go to your room.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So it was
it's a lot.
Yeah, so that happened before the whole suicide note. And you know, I've been through episodes. I mean, I've been through episodes too, but no one ever put me in the tub. But like, I just thought that was the only thing I could do at the moment because I didn't know how else to, you know, at the moment it was more of her body reacting.
Right. So you were having a panic attack as well?
Oh no, I wasn't. But I've had my fair share of panic.
Oh yeah, like your episode, because you were saying you've had your episodes too, where you.
I mean, I've had mental breakdowns like that. I don't know for sure if I ever ended up like shaking. I don't remember.
Mm-hmm.
But like I never had to that extreme because she was saying help me because she was freaking out with what was happening to her body.
Right.
She was literally shaking, like physically shaking. And I was like, oh my God. Like I thought she was going to go to like a seizure. But then she did. And I was like, oh my God. Like, and then she did tell me she drank a whole bottle of wine by herself. And then she also told me she took anxiety meds that day. And I was like,
yeah,
well,
your
this
body's
explains
responding.
that.
Yeah.
Your body's responding, right? But anyway, so I was able to like calm her body. And she ended up being fine the next day. I'm sure she was probably very hungover. But yeah, no, she was fine there. And like I said, that was before everything that happened. And so yeah, so anyway, so at this point, I'm like between that and between this, I'm like, she should not be here. She's probably also overwhelmed. She's 19 years old, away from her hometown, living on her own. Well, with roommates, of course.
Yeah.
And she also got fired from Disney because we all worked at Disney.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And so she got fired, and that was her dream too. Like that was like a dream that she's had. So she like lost her dream. She also didn't want to leave Florida, so she was trying to get like some job at a restaurant. It was just she was under a lot of stress.
Right.
So that obviously triggered her. So anyway, I was at this point, I'm just like, you need to go home. It's dangerous at this point for you to be here. Well, it's like you clearly aren't stable. And obviously I shouldn't feel like I have to be watching her at all times.
No, that's not your job.
That's not my job.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I'm glad that I did that. And right now, from what I see on Facebook, she has like a family. I think she's married, have a kid.
Oh, good for her.
I think I did save her. After I did pretty much tell on her, she actually stopped talking to me. She was mad at me.
Absolutely.
And still today,
that makes sense.
Yeah. So at this point, I was just like, whatever. I'd rather you hate me than you be dead.
Right.
But you know what's crazy too is that like the other roommates thought I was wrong for interfering. I don't know if they told me that before or after the whole them picking them up. I don't remember. But in my head, I was just like, at one point, you have to be a human being. It doesn't matter if we're friends with her or not. I mean, we were like new friends with her.
Yeah.
Like we're all friendly with each other. But it's like, it doesn't matter how close you are to that person. If you feel this person is in danger to killing themselves, you need to intervene no matter what. Yeah, they'll probably hate you and think you're breaking a boundary. But like, you have to do it, you know? And I really, truly think I did save her. Because who would have known what happened after that? And I know she used to cut herself too. I think she did like cut herself the night before she told me. I think I remember we went to like hang out with some friends. She was like drinking and she was like, yeah, I cut myself last night. And I was like, what? She just said like nonchalant. And I was
like that's not normal.
And that was the night before the suicide note. So all of these things, like the thing with the alcohol in the bathroom, and then her telling me she cut herself, and then like her suicide note. I'm just like, these are all the red flags. And next up is her killing herself.
Absolutely.
So
I think what's wrong with our society today is that we have so much stigma around mental health that people don't want to talk about it. They don't even want to be in your position, right? They don't want to be the person that's the one that finds the note and figures out, oh no, like the person I'm in close proximity to is struggling.
Yeah, next door to
now,
me.
What do I do next?
Right.
Like my whole mission is to just start talking about it, because so many people don't realize how many people struggle with the fact that they just don't want to be on this planet.
Yeah.
Like there's so many people who just really don't, and it's okay. Like it's okay to feel that way. And then it's okay to tell people you feel that way. And it's okay to make art to express why you feel that way, share your human experience. And I really think that if we start talking about it more, and if we start making it less scary and more honest, like I was on this awesome podcast, and he's like, I don't ask people how they are. I say, how's your mental? He's like, I ask them how their mental health is, instead of like, hey, how are you? He's like, no, I say, how is your mental health? And I was like, whoa, that's like scraping off that surface level and getting down into the nitty gritty of like, how are you
should start
actually
doing that?
Right?
We should start doing that.
Isn't that a whole new level of like, instead of, hey, how are you? It's like, hey, how is your mental health? It's like, oh, wait, what? Like, are you asking me how my mind is today? Like, whoa, right? Like it opens a completely different conversation.
It does. One question I do have on that is, before we go into your film, is I think that's amazing. I think that truly is. And so if someone asked me, I would love it. But what can we do if people just may think that's overstepping. You know, people who are probably more private. And if I'm like saying, oh, how's your mental health? They may not be able to be like, okay, why are you trying to like dig deep into like my brain?
Right.
Some people just like the small talk. I personally don't. I hate small talk.
I hate
But
small
like,
talk.
so yeah, it's just like so like draining. But yeah, no, I hate the whole like, oh, so what's new? It's like, oh, just work, you know.
Yeah.
Same old, same old. It's like, cool. For me, I'm just like, so I interviewed this guest, and it's like, you know, like I have a, you know, sometimes, you know, what's crazy too is that, and also we're around the holidays too. So a lot of these small talk conversations are happening this month, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And
especially with family members.
absolutely, yeah. So like for me, I want to talk about what I've been doing because I'm, you know, doing amazing things. But a lot of people are just like, yeah, same old, just working, like, you know.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm sure there's fun things going on in their life. I mean, I'm sure there's people who are working 9 to 5s who just go to work and come home and be like, how about you tell me about a movie you watch?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, tell me something. Like, there has to be something going on in your life because then it's like kind of closes the conversation.
Yeah.
Like, okay, cool.
I think people are really shocked when they get presents. Like when they get someone who's actually present and available, who's like here for it, like who's here for whoever they're talking to. It almost shocks them a little bit because everyone is so used to people being caught in their head and in their narrative of however their world is. So if someone, so really the most healing thing you can do is be present for the person in front of you. Like really, like you don't even have to say, how is your mental health? You don't even have to say that. You just have to be fully present and available. Like don't think about what you're going to say back. Don't, you know, anything like that. Just be like open and available to whatever the interaction is. And I think that is what allows connection, right? Like that's what makes people feel seen and heard and wanting to be here when they get that reflection back to them. And I think that, you know, suicide is an epidemic of loneliness and it's an epidemic of feeling separated.
Yes, absolutely.
The most common thing I've noticed within like conversations I've had with people who are struggling with suicidal ideation or myself even is that there's something inside of, I'll say me, there's something inside of me that tells me I'm different, I'm special, no one else struggles with this. It's something that makes me feel so different and so not human, I guess, that it's like the biggest lie. Like the biggest lie is that I'm separate. The biggest lie is that I don't belong to be here. And it's like really allowing myself to feel like I belong because I choose to feel like I belong, right? Like it's about like, what am I going to choose? Because I've been choosing all of this for so long. I've been choosing the opposite of how I want to feel for so long. How do I just start choosing differently? How do I start in the moment choosing like, hey, you know what? I'm going to this event and I belong. I'm going to choose that I belong and I'm going to walk into those space as if I belong. And I think like the ego wants to make us feel so special, you know? And we're all just human. Yeah. We are all special in our special little ways. But ultimately, that specialness is also what can cause separation and make you feel isolated.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I mean, that's just like, the specialness is just like, if you just don't vibe with someone else, like that's completely normal.
Yeah.
Some people try to like, some people get upset, like, oh, like, why aren't we connecting? It's like, it's normal. Yeah. If you don't vibe with someone, as we spoke to about before we got onto this podcast, if you know what I mean.
You watch dogs, this is going to sound so weird, but like we're all part of nature, right? So like if you watch dogs at a dog park, there's dogs that go and sniff and are like, oh my God, let's run and play together.
And then each other's butts.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's dogs that go up to another dog and they smell it and like, oh no, like I don't want to deal with that.
I don't smell your butt.
Yeah. It's nothing wrong. It's just they don't have they don't vibe together and it's okay. Right. And it's like the same with humans. It's like you don't vibe. You're not on the same frequency. That's okay. Yeah. Find people who are your people.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I always kind of wonder why they sniff each other's butts. So weird that is when you think about it. It's like, it'd be really weird if humans did that.
I was thinking the same. I was like, oh my gosh, that visual is just like, that's how we say hello now.
God, goodness. So we're going to be talking about this and we're going to see people sniffing their people's butts. Like, where did this conversation head towards? Right. Okay. So tell us, I mean, we already talked about a little bit about your film Bloom. So like, when can we expect to see it? Like, tell me more.
We are in pre-production. So we're in the funding phase, which means we have everything ready to go. Now we're getting that money, which is super exciting. I'm like super excited. We are going to be shooting the concept trailer. So instead of people reading the script these days, they want to see a visual of like, what is it going to feel like, look like, what is that experience going to be like? Just give us 90 seconds of it. So we're about to go shoot that, which is really exciting because once that is ready to go, we are going to be able to start pitching to the actors that we want. We're going to be able to start getting investors, all of the next steps for the film funding process. It has been a journey. I started the idea came in 2008.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I was just bored at work as a cocktail server. On the days that we didn't have very many people, I just had like receipt papers writing down my ideas and like guest checks. And like, so there are cocktail napkins with the script, parts of the script on it. But really it became something bigger than me. I was, I think it was 2015 is when I was like, oh my goodness, I have like an actual full blown manuscript. And I finished it. I had to be so disciplined because it was so challenging to actually finish it. The finishing it part was the hardest part. Like I loved being like, oh, I'm so inspired. Let's just go write. And that would come every now and then. And I would just ride with it. But then once I was like, oh, wait, this is an actual project that is actually needing to be completed. I was like, oh, I don't have writer's block. And so I had to like create time, 90 minutes, 3 days a week, and just show up at the same time, force myself to sit there and type or write. I wrote most of it by hand and then I went and transcribed it on the computer. But yeah, it was when I finally had incredible actors in New York sit down at a table and read it. I was like, ooh, we got something. And so then that same year I did play readings in New York, Oklahoma, and Houston. And then in 2020, I adapted it to a film and did Zoom calls with actors from LA and New York and just incredible talent and just kept, making it better. And now it's like ready to go and ready to be shot. And it's been such a healing experience for me and for anyone who gets to experience it because it just shows that you're not alone with that negative critic in your head. Like everyone has it to some degree, maybe not to the extent of, suicidal ideation, but to the extent of like, hey, you're about to take a test and you suck.
I'm sure we could all experience that.
Yeah, like test anxiety. It's the same function.
Yeah.
It's that self-doubt and negativity. But it's everyone who's come in touch with it is like, wow, like you really see me. Like I understand what it's like to be in that battle and in that world of and if you don't have a mental health issue, because not everyone struggles with certain things, there's a compassion that's available for people to see, oh wow, this is how some people exist in the world. Like this is how they operate. Now I understand a little more why. Or if the people who have like, let's say alcoholism go and, see them film, it's like, I do have a problem. Maybe I can go get help. So there's so many different ways that this film can help heal the world is ultimately my goal.
This is awesome. I'm so excited to watch it too. I'm sure it's going to take obviously a little bit until it actually comes out. I know that does take a while, but it feels so
hopefully sooner than later. I think we're picking up some momentum. Yeah.
I just know like production wise, like
absolutely
things can take a bit and such. Like, but I'm like also just so grateful to like, meet you in the beginning stages of this. Cause now when it like I know her.
Come to the premiere. I'm inviting y'all.
Wait, I want to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is it in New York?
I don't know yet.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say because like if it's in New York, like I'm actually from New Jersey.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So I'm like right there. So I was like, technically I could just go and like stay with family, But
yeah,
that's so cool.
There's scenes definitely being shot in New York because some of the story takes place in New York. It's mainly being shot in New Mexico. It was rewritten for production costs to be shot in New Mexico. So I basically rewrote most of the stories to fit New Mexico world because production cost was so much cheaper than the actual location.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That it was before. And I don't know. I'm sure there'll be several screenings wherever we can have them.
Wherever it is, I'll go.
Okay. I'm really excited.
I'll go. I've also never been to a premiere before. I've been to like film festivals because I was like an extra in like a show. Yeah, but besides that, like, no, I never been to premiere. I've always wanted to. Right. But yeah, I want to say thank you so much for coming on. It was honestly, I'm so glad we found each other.
I've appreciated everything you've gotten me connected to with, Podmatch, and then just having this conversation. I'm so glad. Yeah, I'm glad our connections crossed and we're getting to kind of establish this thing. And I mean, I can't wait to see you at the premiere when it happens.
Yay! Alrighty, well, everyone that's listening, hope you guys have a good rest of your day and stay tuned for next episode.